The shuttle hit the ground hard. Katie Morgan felt her teeth slam together as the small craft bounced and rolled through the purple trees. Metal screamed against rock. The safety straps cut into her shoulders. Then everything went quiet. Katie opened her eyes and tasted blood. Her lip was split and her head hurt. Smoke filled the cabin. She had to get out fast. Her hands shook as she released the safety straps and grabbed her emergency pack from under the seat. The shuttle door was bent, but still worked. Katie pushed it open and stumbled outside. The forest around her was strange. The trees had purple leaves that moved in the wind like water. The sky above was pale green with two small suns. This was not Earth. Katie looked back at her shuttle. Black smoke poured from the engine. The metal hull was cracked open like an egg. She would not be flying anywhere soon. Her hands found the emergency beacon on her belt. She pressed the button, but no light came on. The crash had broken it. She was alone on an unknown world with no way to call for help. The research ship Starweaver would not miss her for 3 days. That was how long her survey mission was supposed to take. By then, she could be dead. Katie forced herself to think clearly. She was a scientist. She had trained for emergencies like this. First, she needed water, then shelter, then food. Everything else could wait. She walked away from the smoking shuttle and listened. Water made noise. It bubbled and splashed. Katie heard something like that coming from her left. She pushed through the purple bushes and found a stream. The water was clear and moved fast over smooth rocks. Katie knelt and cupped some in her hands. It tasted clean. The stream would be her lifeline. Katie walked along its edge until she found a good spot to make camp. A large rock stuck out of the ground near the water. Purple trees grew thick around it, giving cover from the wind. The ground was flat enough for her small tent. Katie unpacked her emergency supplies. She had enough food bars for 5 days. Her water filter would keep the stream water safe to drink. Her tent was small but warm. A solar battery could power her tablet and other tools. It was not much, but it was enough to stay alive. She set up the tent behind the large rock. Then she gathered dry wood from the forest floor. Making a fire took longer than expected. The wood here was different from earthwood. It burned slow and made purple smoke. But it gave heat and light. And that was what mattered. As the green sun set, Katie sat by her fire and ate a food bar. She pulled out her tablet and made notes about the crash and her location. Then she found her paper notebook and ballpoint pen. Electronics could break, but paper lasted forever. She wrote down everything she could remember about the crash and the strange forest around her. The night sounds began as darkness fell. Something howled in the distance. Other creatures called back with different voices. Katie had never heard sounds like these before. They made her skin crawl. She added more wood to the fire and checked that her emergency knife was within reach. But the sounds did not come closer. Whatever lived in this forest seemed content to stay away from her fire. Katie wrote in her notebook until her eyes grew heavy. Then she crawled into her tent and zipped it closed. She woke before dawn to the sound of breaking twigs. Something was moving around outside her tent. Katie lay still and listened. The footsteps were light but careful, not human. She gripped her knife and waited. The sounds moved in a circle around her camp. Sometimes they stopped for long minutes. Then they started again. Whatever was out there was studying her camp, learning about her. Katie had the feeling she was being watched by intelligent eyes. When the green suns rose, the sound stopped. Katie waited another hour before leaving her tent. Her camp looked the same as the night before. The fire had burned down to cold ash. The stream still bubbled nearby. But something was different. Marks in the dirt showed where something had walked around her tent. The prints looked like large dog paws but with claw marks that cut deep into the ground. Katie measured one print with her hand. It was longer than her fingers and twice as wide. She followed the tracks to the edge of her camp. They led into the thick purple bushes and disappeared. But Katie could feel eyes watching her from the shadows. She was not alone on this world. Something lived here, and it was curious about her. Katie made a new fire and heated water for coffee. The hot drink helped calm her nerves. She wrote about the tracks in her notebook and drew pictures of the paw prints. As she worked, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. A twig snapped in the bushes to her right. Katie looked up but saw nothing. Purple leaves moved in the breeze, but there was no wind. She went back to her writing. Another sound came from her left. This time she did not look up. She kept writing and pretended she had not heard anything. Minutes passed in silence. Then Katie heard a new sound. It was like a bird chirping, but deeper, more like a question than a song. She finished her sentence and closed the notebook. Whatever was watching her was getting brave enough to make noise. Soon it might get brave enough to show itself. Katie stood and walked to the stream to wash her cup. As she knelt by the water, she felt the eyes on her back. The watcher was close now. Very close. Katie could almost hear it breathing. She washed her cup slowly and did not turn around. When she was done, she walked back to her camp as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Katie was no longer alone on the strange world. Something was watching her every move, and soon she would have to decide what to do about it. Katie woke on her third morning to find rocks arranged in a circle around her tent. Someone had moved them during the night while she slept. The rocks were smooth and flat, placed with care. This was not the work of wind or chance. She stepped out of her tent and studied the rock circle. Each stone was about the size of her hand. They had been taken from the stream and carried up the bank. Katie counted 12 rocks in total. 12 rocks meant 12 trips from the water to her tent. Someone had spent a long time making this circle. Katie picked up one of the rocks and turned it over. It was still damp from the stream. The placement had happened recently, maybe just before dawn. She looked at the purple bushes around her camp, but saw nothing moving. Yet the feeling of being watched was stronger than ever. She made her morning fire and heated water for coffee. As she worked, Katie talked out loud to the empty forest. She told her unseen watcher about the weather and the taste of her food. She described the purple trees and the green sky. Her voice was calm and friendly, like she was talking to a pet. Something rustled in the bushes to her left. Katie kept talking and did not look. She had learned that sudden movements made the sounds stop. Better to act like she had not noticed anything. The rustling came closer. Katie sat down by her fire with her coffee and notebook. She began writing about the rock circle and what it might mean. As her pen moved across the paper, a new sound came from the bushes. It was the same deep chirping she had heard before, but louder now, more confident. She looked up from her writing and saw it. A pair of golden eyes stared at her from between the purple leaves. They were large and bright, sitting in a dark face covered with short fur. The creature was crouched low to the ground about 20 feet away. Katie could see the shape of pointed ears and a long snout filled with white teeth. Katie did not move. She kept her eyes on the creature and spoke in a soft voice. "Hello there. Are you the one who made the rock circle? That was very nice of you." The creature tilted its head to one side. The golden eyes never blinked. Katie could see now that it was young, maybe not fully grown. Its body was sleek and built for running. Long legs ended in large paws with curved claws. This was a predator, but a small one. More rustling came from other bushes. Katie slowly turned her head and saw more golden eyes watching her. She counted 6 pairs in total. A pack of young hunters had surrounded her camp. They could have attacked her while she slept, but they had not. Instead, they had brought her gifts. Katie closed her notebook and set it aside. She kept talking in the same calm voice. "There are more of you. That's good. I was getting lonely out here by myself. My name is Katie. What are your names?" One of the creatures stepped out of the bushes. It was the same one she had been watching. The fur on its body was black with silver patches. Its tail was long and thick, held high like a flag. The creature stood about 4 feet tall and looked like a cross between a wolf and something from a dinosaur book. The other creatures stayed hidden, but Katie could hear them moving closer. Their leader was testing her, seeing how dangerous she might be. Katie had no weapons in sight and made no threatening moves. She just sat by her fire and talked like they were old friends. "You're very brave to come out where I can see you," Katie said. "The others are smart to stay hidden until they know I'm safe." "I understand that. I would do the same thing." The creature took another step forward. Its nostrils flared as it tested her scent. Katie smelled like soap and coffee and the smoke from her fire. Nothing threatening. Nothing like the other predators that lived in this forest. Katie reached into her pack and pulled out a food bar. She unwrapped it slowly, making no sudden moves. The creature's eyes followed her hands. Katie broke the bar in half and placed one piece on the ground between them. Then she ate the other half, showing it was safe. The creature looked at the food but did not move toward it. It was still deciding if Katie was friend or enemy. She respected that caution. Smart hunters stayed alive longer. More creatures stepped out of the bushes. Katie counted 6 in total, just as she had thought. They were all young, probably from the same family group. Their leader was the largest, with broader shoulders and a more confident stance. The others looked to it for guidance. "You're the boss, aren't you?" Katie said to the leader. "What should I call you? You look like a Jake to me. Is that okay?" Jake tilted his head again. The name meant nothing to him, but the friendly tone in Katie's voice was clear. This strange creature was not showing teeth or claws. It was making soft sounds and offering food. This was new behavior for Jake and his pack. In their world, there were only 3 kinds of creatures. Prey animals ran away when they saw predators. Other predators fought back with teeth and claws, and the very dangerous ones stood still and showed their own weapons as a warning. But Katie was doing none of these things. She had no visible weapons and no natural armor. Her teeth were small and flat, meant for eating plants. Her claws were tiny and soft. She should have been easy prey, but she showed no fear. Jake had never seen anything like this before. His pack was curious but careful. They spread out in a wider circle around Katie's camp, watching for any sign of hidden danger. There had to be a trick. Nothing in nature acted like this strange creature. Katie finished her food and went back to writing in her notebook. Her pen scratched across the paper as she described the creatures watching her. Jake crept closer, drawn by the soft sound. He had never seen anything make marks on a flat surface before. The pen fascinated Jake. It was small and thin like a twig, but it left dark trails wherever Katie touched it to the paper. The trails formed patterns that seemed important to her. She looked at them carefully and sometimes made more patterns next to them. Jake moved closer until he was only 10 feet away. Katie glanced up at him and smiled. "Curious about my writing? This is how humans remember things. We make marks that mean words and words that mean ideas. Pretty clever, right?" She held up the notebook so Jake could see the pages covered with her neat handwriting. To him, it looked like magic. How could something so simple create permanent communication? In his world, only scent marks and claw scratches on trees lasted more than a moment. Katie set the notebook down and picked up her pen. She wrote Jake's name in large letters and showed it to him. "Jake. That's you. These marks mean your name." Jake stared at the marks. They meant nothing to him, but Katie's excitement was clear. She had created something permanent using only a small tool and her own movements. This was beyond anything Jake had ever seen. The other young predators crept closer. They chirped questions to Jake in their own language. What was the strange creature doing? Was it dangerous? Should they attack or retreat? Jake chirped back, telling them to wait and watch. This creature was not like anything they had been taught about. It might be important to understand it before deciding what to do. The pack settled down in the purple bushes to observe Katie's strange behavior. Katie went back to her writing, describing each of the 6 creatures watching her. She gave them all names: Jake, Lucy, Ben, Amy, Carlos, and Nina. She wrote about their golden eyes and sleek fur and careful movements. She drew pictures of their paw prints and tried to guess their age and family structure. As she worked, the pack watched every movement of her pen. They saw her create mark after mark, building patterns that clearly meant something important to her. It was like watching magic happen, and they could not look away. Katie had been writing in her notebook for almost an hour. Jake sat 10 feet away, watching her pen move across the paper. His golden eyes followed every stroke. The other 5 cubs stayed hidden in the bushes, but Katie could see their eyes glinting in the shadows. She finished describing the morning's events and looked up at Jake. "You're very patient. Most people would have gotten bored watching me write by now." Jake tilted his head. The sounds Katie made were soft and musical, not like the harsh calls his pack used to communicate. Everything about this strange creature was different from what he knew about the world. Katie stood up and stretched. Her muscles were stiff from sitting by the fire for so long. As she moved, Jake tensed and took a step back. His pack chirped warning sounds from the bushes. Any sudden movement could mean danger. "Sorry," Katie said, sitting back down slowly. "I forgot you might be scared of quick movements. I just needed to stretch my legs." She picked up her notebook and pen again. Jake relaxed as she returned to the familiar position. He had learned that Katie was most peaceful when she was making marks on paper. The pen in her hand seemed to calm her, like a comfort object. Katie opened to a fresh page and began writing her daily log entry. She wrote about the weather, her food supplies, and the status of her broken shuttle. As she worked, she spoke out loud about what she was writing. "Today is my 4th day on this planet. The green suns are bright and warm. My food will last 3 more days if I'm careful. The shuttle engine is completely dead. No chance of fixing it with the tools I have." Jake listened to the sounds and watched the marks appear on the paper. Katie's pen moved in smooth, flowing motions. Each mark was different, but they formed patterns that repeated. Jake began to see that certain marks appeared over and over again. Katie noticed Jake's intense focus on her pen. She held it up so he could see it better. "This is called a pen. It's just plastic and ink, nothing special. But watch what happens when I use it." She turned to a clean page and wrote in large, clear letters, "Jake." Jake leaned forward to see the marks better. Katie pointed to each letter as she said the sounds. "Jake, Jake. That's your name. These marks mean you." She wrote the name again on the same page, then again below that. 3 times, the same 4 marks in the same order. Jake's ears perked up. The pattern was always the same. The marks meant something specific and repeatable. Katie tore the page out of her notebook and held it toward Jake. "This is yours. It has your name on it." Jake did not move toward the paper. He had never seen anything like this before. In his world, communication happened through sounds, scents, and body language. All of these faded quickly. But the marks on Katie's paper stayed exactly the same no matter how long he looked at them. Katie set the paper on the ground between them and went back to writing in her notebook. She started drawing pictures this time instead of making the strange mark patterns. First, she drew the outline of a tree. Jake recognized the shape immediately. Next, Katie drew a simple picture of herself sitting by a fire. Jake could see the resemblance: the long hair, the upright posture, the strange clothes. Then Katie drew a picture of Jake himself. She made his pointed ears and long tail and 4 legs. When she was done, she showed the drawing to Jake. "This is you," she said, pointing to the drawing, "and this is me. We're sitting by my fire together." Jake stared at the drawing. Katie had somehow captured his likeness using only the small pen. This was beyond his understanding. How could marks on paper look like real things? How could a simple tool create images of the world? The other cubs chirped excitedly from their hiding places. They had seen the drawing too. Lucy crept out of the bushes for a better look. She was smaller than Jake, with lighter-colored fur and bright, curious eyes. She moved closer to Katie's camp than any of them had dared before. Katie smiled at Lucy and drew another picture. This time, she made a female form with the right size and fur pattern. When she finished, she held up the drawing and pointed at Lucy. "Lucy, this is you." Lucy's eyes went wide. She chirped a question to Jake, who chirped back. None of them had ever seen their own faces except in still water. But Katie had somehow made a picture that looked like Lucy on paper that would not fade or ripple. Ben came out of the bushes next, then Amy, then Carlos and Nina. Soon all 6 cubs sat in a semicircle around Katie's fire, watching her work. They stayed just out of arm's reach, ready to run if needed. but their fear was being replaced by amazement. Katie drew each cub in turn, making their individual markings and expressions. She wrote their names under each picture in the same clear letters she had used for Jake. When she was done, she had a page full of the pack members with their written names. She tore out the page and placed it on the ground where all the cubs could see. "This is your pack. These are all of you with your names." The cubs leaned forward to study the drawings. They chirped and trilled to each other in their own language. Katie could tell they were excited and confused at the same time. They understood that something important was happening, but they did not know what it meant. Katie picked up her pen and held it where all the cubs could see. It was just a simple ballpoint pen, blue plastic with a clear grip. Nothing magical about it at all. But to the cubs, it was the most amazing thing they had ever seen. "This little tool can make permanent pictures and words," Katie said. "In my world, every human knows how to use one. We learn as children. We use them to remember things, to send messages, to create stories." She demonstrated by writing simple words in large letters: tree, fire, water, rock. For each word, she pointed to the real object. The cubs followed her gaze and began to understand that the marks represented real things in their world. Katie was creating a connection between the marks on paper and the world around them. This was language in a form they had never imagined. Not sounds that faded or scents that blew away, but permanent marks that could be studied and remembered. Jake crept closer to get a better look at Katie's pen. He was now only 5 feet away, well within pouncing distance if he chose to attack. But he showed no aggression. His body language was curious and respectful. Katie continued working, showing no fear of the powerful predator sitting so close. As Katie wrote more words and drew more pictures, something incredible happened. Jake began to make soft chirping sounds every time she finished a new mark. He was trying to communicate with her in return, copying her rhythm and tone. Katie looked up at Jake and chirped back, mimicking his sound as best she could. Jake's ears perked up and he chirped again, louder this time. The other cubs joined in, creating a chorus of excited voices. For the first time since the crash, Katie felt truly connected to this alien world. These young predators were intelligent and curious. They wanted to understand her just as much as she wanted to understand them. Her simple pen had become a bridge between their species. Katie reached into her pack and pulled out a second pen, her backup. She held it out toward Jake, moving very slowly. Jake sniffed the pen but did not touch it. He looked back at Katie with questioning eyes. "This one is for you," Katie said, "if you want to try making marks like I do." Jake did not understand her words, but he understood her intent. She was offering to share her magic with him. The small tool that created permanent communication was being offered as a gift. Jake had never received such an honor from any creature. He reached out with one careful paw and touched the pen with the tip of his claw. It was just plastic and metal, nothing special to touch. But Jake had seen what it could do in Katie's hands. This small object might be the key to powers he could not imagine. The other cubs watched in silence as their leader considered Katie's offer. This was a moment that would change everything they thought they knew about the world. The strange creature with no claws or fangs was offering to teach them her greatest skill. Jake looked from the pen to Katie's face. Her eyes were kind and patient. She was not trying to trick him or trap him. She genuinely wanted to share her knowledge with his pack. This was friendship of a kind Jake had never experienced before. He touched the pen again with his paw and chirped softly. It was a sound of acceptance and gratitude. Katie smiled and set the pen down between them, where Jake could reach it safely. "Tomorrow I'll show you how to use it," Katie said. Today was enough new things for one day. The cubs settled down around her fire as the green suns began to set. They had found something more valuable than food or territory. They had found a teacher who could show them how to make thoughts permanent and shareable across time. Katie woke to find a smooth gray stone sitting next to her notebook. The rock was perfectly round and flat, about the size of her palm. It had been placed carefully on a bed of soft purple leaves. Someone had spent time choosing the perfect stone and presenting it like a gift. Jake sat 15 feet away, watching her with bright golden eyes. His tail swished slowly back and forth. When Katie picked up the stone, Jake's ears perked up and he made a soft chirping sound. He was clearly pleased that she had noticed his offering. "This is beautiful, Jake," Katie said, turning the stone over in her hands. "Did you bring this for me?" Jake chirped again, louder this time. He stood up and took a few steps closer to Katie's camp. His body language was excited but careful. He wanted something from her, but Katie was not sure what. She looked at the stone, then at Jake, then at her pen lying next to her notebook. Suddenly she understood. Jake had seen her write names and draw pictures. He had watched her make permanent marks on paper. Now he wanted her to make marks on his stone. "You want me to write your name on this, don't you?" Katie said. Jake tilted his head and chirped. Katie took that as a yes. She picked up her pen and carefully wrote "Jake" on the smooth surface of the stone. The ink showed up dark against the gray rock. When she was done, she held it up so Jake could see. Jake's whole body seemed to vibrate with excitement. He bounced on his feet and made happy trilling sounds. The other cubs appeared from the bushes, drawn by their leader's obvious joy. They gathered around to see what had made Jake so pleased. Katie showed them the stone with Jake's name written on it. The cubs chirped and whistled to each other in their own language. They had never seen anything like this before. Jake's name was now permanent, carved in dark marks on lasting stone. It would not fade or wash away. Jake approached Katie's camp and stopped just out of arm's reach. He made a gentle whining sound and nudged the stone toward her with his nose. Then he backed away and sat down, watching her expectantly. Katie understood. Jake wanted his stone back, but he also wanted to keep it safe. She set the marked stone down between them where Jake could see it clearly. "There, now you have your own name stone. It belongs to you." Jake crept forward and picked up the stone carefully in his jaws. He carried it to a spot near Katie's fire and set it down gently. Then he lay down next to it, his body curled protectively around his treasure. The other cubs watched this with great interest. Lucy was the first to understand what Jake had received. She disappeared into the forest and returned 20 minutes later with her own stone. This one was smaller than Jake's and perfectly white. She placed it near Katie's notebook and sat back, looking hopeful. Katie smiled and picked up her pen. "Lucy, right? You want your name on your stone too?" She wrote Lucy in neat letters on the white rock. Lucy's reaction was even stronger than Jake's had been. She rolled on her back and made happy yipping sounds. When Katie finished, Lucy snatched up her stone and carried it to her own special spot near the fire. That seemed to break the dam. Ben rushed off to find his own rock, followed by Amy, then Carlos, and Nina. Within an hour, Katie had a line of young predators waiting for their turn. Each had carefully chosen a special stone and wanted their name written on it. Ben brought a long, thin rock that was dark blue with white stripes. Amy found one that was perfectly round and smooth. Carlos chose a rough, bumpy stone that felt like sandpaper. Nina's rock was small and sparkled with tiny crystals. Katie wrote each name carefully, using her clearest handwriting. She made sure every letter was perfect. These stones were obviously very important to the cubs. They treated each marked rock like a precious treasure. As she worked, Katie began to understand what was happening. In the cubs' world, nothing lasted forever. Their scent marks faded within days. Scratch marks on trees healed over time. Even their memories could change or fade as years passed. But the names Katie wrote on their stones would last for years, maybe decades. She had given each cub something permanent to call their own. In a world where everything changed, these marked stones would stay the same. When Katie finished the last name, all 6 cubs sat around her fire with their special stones. They had arranged them in a careful pattern, each stone in its own place. Jake's gray stone was in the center, with the others arranged around it like points on a star. The cubs spent the rest of the morning just looking at their stones and touching them with their paws. They chirped softly to each other, sharing their excitement and wonder. Katie had never seen any animal act so reverently toward an object. Around noon, Ben stood up and trotted into the forest. He returned with a handful of ripe purple fruits. These were similar to berries but larger, about the size of plums. Ben placed the fruits near Katie's feet and backed away, looking expectant. Katie understood this was payment for her work on his stone. "Thank you, Ben. These look delicious." She tried one of the fruits. It was sweet and juicy, much better than her emergency food bars. Ben chirped happily when he saw Katie eating his gift. The other cubs took note of this exchange. Within minutes, Katie found herself surrounded by offerings. Amy brought fresh green shoots that tasted like lettuce. Carlos found nuts that were crunchy and filling. Nina presented a collection of edible roots. Lucy brought clear water in a large leaf folded into a cup shape. Only Jake brought something different. Instead of food, he offered Katie a piece of smooth bark with claw marks scratched into its surface. The marks formed a simple pattern, 3 straight lines crossed by 2 curved ones. It was clearly deliberate, like primitive writing. Katie studied the marked bark carefully. "Did you make this, Jake?" Jake chirped and pawed at the ground near his name stone. Then he made the same scratching motion in the dirt, creating similar marks. He was showing Katie that he could make permanent marks too, just not as neat and precise as hers. This was incredible. Jake was trying to communicate using symbols, copying Katie's example with the tools available to him. He had created his own version of writing using claws and bark instead of pen and paper. Katie pulled out her notebook and carefully drew Jake's symbol pattern. Then she showed him the drawing and pointed to the marks on the bark. "These are your marks. You made writing, just like me." Jake's eyes went wide when he saw his claw marks reproduced in Katie's neat drawing style. She had taken his crude scratches and made them precise and clean. This was like seeing his own thoughts made beautiful and permanent. The other cubs gathered around to see Jake's symbol and Katie's drawing of it. They chirped excitedly to each other. If Jake could make marks that Katie found worth copying, maybe they could too. Amy scratched her own pattern in the dirt near her white stone. Katie dutifully copied it into her notebook. Then Ben tried, then Carlos, then Nina and Lucy. Soon Katie had a page full of the cubs' original symbols, each one drawn neat and clear. She showed them the page when she was done. "Look, you're all making your own writing now. Each of you has your own special symbol." The cubs stared at the notebook page with something like awe. Their own crude scratch marks had been transformed into something beautiful and permanent. Katie had not just given them names on stones. She had shown them how to create their own lasting communication. As the day wore on, the cubs became bolder about approaching Katie's camp. They brought her more gifts, interesting rocks, pretty flowers, unusual pieces of wood. Each gift earned the giver a small drawing or symbol in Katie's notebook. By evening, Katie realized she had accidentally created a primitive economy. The cubs brought her things they thought were valuable or beautiful. In return, she gave them permanent symbols and drawings. Both sides felt they were getting a good deal. The cubs arranged their name stones in a careful circle around Katie's fire. They settled down for the night closer than ever before, but each kept one paw touching their marked stone. These rocks had become more than gifts. They were proof that the cubs existed, that they had names, that they mattered to someone who could make permanent marks. Katie looked at her notebook, now full of drawings and symbols representing her new pack. Tomorrow, the rescue ship might come. She might have to leave these intelligent young creatures behind. But she had given them something that would last long after she was gone. She had given them the idea that thoughts and names could be made permanent. She had shown them that simple tools could create lasting communication. Most importantly, she had taught them that they were worth remembering. The cubs slept peacefully around her fire, their precious stones glinting in the firelight. Tomorrow, they would bring her more gifts, and she would create more permanent symbols for them. They had found something more valuable than territory or food. They had found a way to make their thoughts live forever. The sound of engines woke Katie from deep sleep. She sat up in her tent and listened. The noise was mechanical, definitely not natural. It came from above the forest canopy, growing louder each second. A ship was coming. Katie scrambled out of her tent and looked up at the green sky. Through the purple leaves, she could see lights moving against the pale dawn. The rescue ship had found her at last. Help was finally here. The 6 cubs were already awake and alert. They stood around their stone circle, ears pointed toward the sky. The engine noise was foreign and frightening to them. Their golden eyes looked to Katie for guidance. Was this new sound a threat? It's okay, Katie said in her calmest voice. Those are friends of mine coming to help. They're in a flying machine like my shuttle, but bigger. The cubs did not understand her words, but her relaxed tone helped ease their fear. Jake picked up his gray namestone and held it protectively. The others did the same with their own marked rocks. Whatever was coming, they would not abandon their treasures. The rescue ship circled twice before finding a place to land. Katie heard trees cracking as the large craft settled into a clearing about half a mile away. Then the engines went quiet. Voices called her name through the forest. "Here," Katie shouted back. "I'm at the stream." She could hear people pushing through the purple bushes getting closer. The cubs pressed together near their stone circle, ready to run if needed. These new humans might not be as friendly as Katie. Captain Roy Hayes was the first to reach Katie's camp. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes. Behind him came Dr. Lisa Park, the ship's medical officer, and 2 security guards. They all stopped short when they saw the 6 young predators gathered around Katie's fire. "Dr. Morgan," Captain Hayes said carefully, "are you all right? Are those creatures dangerous?" "I'm fine, Captain," Katie replied. "And no, they're not dangerous. They're actually quite intelligent. I've been studying them for the past 2 weeks. Dr. Park stepped forward with her medical scanner. "We need to check you for injuries and possible disease exposure. Can you move away from those animals?" Katie looked at the cubs, who were watching the new humans with deep suspicion. Jake had positioned himself between his pack and the strangers. His body language was tense but not aggressive. He was ready to protect his family if needed. "They won't hurt anyone," Katie said, "but they're scared of you. Can you move slowly and keep your voices down?" Captain Hayes nodded to his team. They all took careful steps and spoke in whispers. Dr. Park ran her scanner over Katie from a safe distance. The readings showed she was healthy but tired and undernourished. "We need to get you back to the ship for a full medical check," Dr. Park said. "How soon can you be ready to leave?" Katie's heart sank. She had known this moment would come, but she was not ready for it. The cubs had become like family to her. They had shared food and friendship. She had taught them about permanent communication, and they had shown her their natural intelligence. "Can I have a few minutes to say goodbye?" Katie asked. Captain Hayes looked puzzled. "Goodbye? Dr. Morgan, these are wild animals. You can't form attachments to them." "They're not just animals," Katie said firmly. "Watch this." She picked up her notebook and pen. The cubs immediately moved closer, recognizing the tools that had brought them so much joy. Katie turned to a fresh page and drew a simple picture of the rescue ship landing in the forest. Then she showed it to Jake. "This is the ship that will take me away," she explained. "I have to go with my pack, just like you stay with yours." Jake studied the drawing intently. He could see the ship's shape and the trees around it. Katie was telling him a story using her marks and pictures. He chirped softly, a sound of sadness and understanding. The other cubs gathered around to see the drawing. They made questioning sounds to each other in their own language. Lucy touched her white namestone and looked up at Katie with worried eyes. Dr. Park stared in amazement. "Captain, are you seeing this? These creatures are responding to symbolic communication. They understand that she's showing them pictures of recent events." Katie nodded. "They've learned to recognize my drawings and even create their own simple symbols. Look at this." She flipped through her notebook, showing the crew pages full of drawings and primitive symbols. There were pictures of each cub with their names written clearly. There were copies of the scratch marks they had made, now preserved in neat drawings. There was a record of 2 weeks of interspecies communication. Captain Hayes whistled low. "This is incredible. You've documented first contact with a potentially intelligent species. The Science Council will want to see all of this." "They are intelligent," Katie said. "They understand cause and effect. They can plan ahead. They trade gifts for services. Most importantly, they want to learn. These creatures are on the edge of developing their own written language." Katie pulled out her backup pen and held it toward Jake. He approached slowly, showing no fear of the watching humans. Jake took the pen carefully in his jaws and carried it to his place in the stone circle. I'm giving him this pen as a gift, Katie explained to her rescuers. He's seen what it can do. Maybe he can figure out how to use it himself or teach others about making permanent marks. Ben approached Katie with a new offering, a piece of bark with fresh claw marks scratched into its surface. The marks were more complex than before, forming patterns that almost looked like letters. Katie drew them in her notebook and showed Ben the neat copy. They're already developing their own writing system, Katie said. In 2 weeks, they've gone from no written communication to creating their own symbols. Imagine what they could accomplish with more time. Dr. Park was taking readings with her scanner, pointing it at the cubs. Their brain scans show high activity in areas associated with problem-solving and pattern recognition. The neural complexity is remarkable for creatures this size. Captain Hayes made a decision. We're declaring this moon a protected research zone. No mining or colonization until we can study these creatures properly. Dr. Morgan, would you be willing to return as part of a research team? Katie's face lit up. Yes, absolutely. But I need to explain to them that I'll be back. She turned to Jake and the other cubs. Using simple drawings and gestures, she tried to explain that she would return. She drew pictures of the green suns moving across the sky many times, showing the passage of days and weeks. Then she drew herself coming back to their forest. Jake tilted his head and chirped thoughtfully. He picked up a small stone and carried it to Katie. Using his claws, he scratched a simple mark into the rock's surface, 2 curved lines crossing a straight one. It was his personal symbol, the one Katie had drawn in her notebook. Jake offered the marked stone to Katie. She understood immediately. He was giving her something to remember him by, just as she had given him the pen. Katie accepted the stone carefully and showed it to her rescue team. This is Jake's personal symbol, she said. He created it himself and now he's giving it to me as a friendship gift. If that's not intelligence, I don't know what is. Captain Hayes looked at his team. Pack everything carefully. Every note, every drawing, every interaction needs to be documented. This could change how we understand alien intelligence. As Katie packed her supplies, the cubs arranged their namestones in a tight circle. They seemed to understand that she was leaving, but they were not abandoning their treasures. The marked stones would remain here, proof that the strange human had visited their forest and found them worthy of names. Lucy brought Katie a final gift, a beautiful purple flower that glowed softly in the morning light. Katie drew a quick picture of the flower in her notebook, then gently pressed the real flower between the pages to preserve it. Thank you, Lucy, Katie said. I'll keep this forever. The cubs followed Katie and her rescuers partway through the forest. They stayed back far enough to avoid the strange humans, but close enough to watch Katie leave. At the edge of the clearing where the ship waited, Jake sat down and made a long, mournful howl. Katie turned back one last time. I'll come back, Jake, I promise. Keep practicing your symbols. Keep learning. I'll bring more pens and paper when I return. Jake held the pen she had given him and chirped softly. He understood that she would try to return, even if he did not understand when. 6 months later, Katie returned to the forest moon as part of a full research expedition. She found Jake and his pack living near her old campsite. They had grown larger and more confident, but they still kept their precious namestones arranged in a careful circle. Jake approached her immediately, carrying the pen she had given him. The plastic was scratched from use, but it still worked. Jake had learned to hold it properly and make simple marks on flat rocks and pieces of bark. More importantly, Jake's pack had grown. There were now 12 young creatures living together, and Jake had taught the newcomers about making marks. Katie found crude symbols scratched on trees throughout their territory. The idea of permanent communication was spreading. The research team spent months studying the creatures Katie had named the Vorthak. They confirmed what Katie already knew. These were intelligent beings capable of learning, teaching, and cultural development. The simple gift of a pen had sparked a revolution in how they thought about communication. Years later, Katie would return many times to find the Vorthak developing increasingly complex symbol systems. They had created their own alphabet based on claw marks and scratch patterns. They taught their young to read and write in their own primitive script. Jake had become something like a shaman among his people, the keeper of the sacred knowledge of mark-making. He still carried Katie's original pen, now worn smooth from years of use. When he grew too old to hunt, he spent his days teaching cubs how to create permanent thoughts. The forest moon became a center for xenobiology research, protected by strict laws against exploitation. Katie's field notes from those first 2 weeks became the foundation for first contact protocols with developing species. But for Katie, the most important discovery was not scientific. It was the realization that intelligence and friendship could exist anywhere in the universe. Sometimes the greatest gift you could give another being was not technology or weapons, but something as simple as the ability to make their thoughts permanent and shareable across time. The cubs who had brought her rocks to sign had taught her that curiosity, kindness, and the desire to communicate were truly universal. Even on an alien world, under strange green suns, the connections between thinking beings could bridge any gap.